Hello, I'm Michael Burge. Welcome to Out Bush, Rural Queers on Belonging in the Country. We're joining you from all across Australia in this particular session, as far afield as the West Coast, the East Coast, far South Coast, and the inland regions of New South Wales. So welcome to Out Bush. Now, before I introduce myself a bit more, I'm going to introduce you to our four panelists today in no particular order, and please, panelists, wave when you hear your name. We've got Peter Mitchell, who's joining us from Bundjalung country, which is the far north coast, the northern rivers of New South Wales. Peter actually lives in Lismore, I believe. Is that right, Peter?
Correct.
Thank you. And Peter is the author of 2 chapbooks. We're going to probably find out what a chapbook is. He's a poet. He also writes memoir and short fiction. Peter is joining us with over 40 years of political activism experience, not just for the LGBTQIA+ community, but I'm very pleased to introduce him to you as a Sydney gay and lesbian Mardi Gras 78er. He also has connections with Tropical Fruits and the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. So welcome, very, very welcome to you, Peter.
Thank you.
We also have Cal Móre. Cal, please wave. Cal is joining us from the far south coast of New South Wales in Yuin country and the centre of Cobargo, which is in the Bega Valley. Now, just like me, Cal spent time living in the small township of Wentworth Falls in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales. She studied writing in Dublin, worked for many years in spiritual care, but then turned to writing, I believe, as recently as 2018. So welcome to you, Cal. Thank you for joining us. Josh is probably the furthest distant from us. He's over in southwestern Western Australia. Say hello, Josh. Particularly in the region of Bunbury, in actual fact, from a smaller place called Loudon. Have I said that right?
Yeah, that's good. Yep, Loudon.
Loudon. Now, this place is Wadandi country, and Josh is joining us probably as our most prolific author. He's the author of 9 books, and by the looks of you, Josh, you've got at least 9 more left in you, I reckon. He moved bush from living as a young man in Perth, and I think, 20 years ago, you said you escaped the bush. Is that right, Josh?
I escaped the city, yeah.
Sorry, I'm talking cross purposes. We escaped the city to the bush. Some of us do go back. We might talk about that a bit today. And last but not least, we have Shayne de Groot joining us from the northwestern outer suburbs of Sydney. But now Shayne actually lives in Sydney at the moment. Is that right, Shayne?
Yeah,
that's right. You come from the country in the Narooma district, which is also Yuin country, I believe, but more specifically in Dalmeny. Have I said that correctly?
Yeah.
Dalmeny. Well, there we go. Down in Yuin country, not too far from where Cal hails from. And just a bit of background about Shayne. Shayne, like many of us in the country, left to go to the big city for tertiary education, started in journalism, quickly moved to acting and creative writing, currently a creative writing student at the University of New South Wales, and has had some work published by the university publication there, Tharunka. But also in Shayne's repertoire is playwriting. So that completes the picture from poetry, chapbooks, through to playwriting, short fiction, memoir, non-fiction, illustrations, books for young people. These are the works that you'll be exposed to today. A little bit more about me. I'm an author and journalist. I live in the country. My main background as a journalist has been for Fairfax Media, which unfortunately is not really with us anymore. But I am, and I'm a writer. I've just released my first book, Tank Water, my first novel. It's hitting the shelves across Australia at the moment. But we'll be talking a little bit about that and the rest of our publications today. Now, I have been delighted to chat with our panelists today in a few days, taking time out of their busy lives to work out the themes and chat about the themes that we'll be covering today in our session, Out Bush. There were 4 main ones that seem to connect us, although we've got a couple more up our sleeves, and we'll be working through those. So the first one of them is a broad-ranging theme, which came up when I first chatted with Peter. So I'm going to throw to you first, Peter, on this. It's this notion of a binary divide between city and country. I think a lot of country people talk about this. Why did you move there? What on earth possessed you to leave the Sydney real estate market or whatever city you have lived in? So, Peter, firstly, why did you pick that subject out of all the things that we could talk about?
Well, as the themes for this session have changed somewhat, the city versus country binary seemed to me a false binary. And I'm glad you changed it to its present form, which is the notion of city and country and whether it crops up in our writing or doesn't crop up. Do you want me to speak about my own writing or whether...
Yes, do. Let us know. I notice I use the term crop up. Does it crop up in your writing? It's an agricultural term, really.
The notion of the city versus the country doesn't enter my writing to any degree at all. Indeed, I've never considered it as a narrative structure in the 30 years of my writing apprenticeship. I craft poetry and memoir, short fiction, and literary criticism, as much of my work is based on or influenced by the trajectories of my life. Both urban and rural and remote settings are used in each mode of writing, the two complementing each other as opposed to contrasting. With my poetry, I feel the subject I'm writing about determines the setting of each standalone poem or sequence of poems.
So we're not necessarily going to experience any sort of scenes of willow trees by country rivers and heritage buildings in your writing, Peter. Is that what you're telling me?
Can you repeat that question? I didn't quite hear you.
My question is, I'll cut to the chase and ask you again. We're not dealing with a bush poet when it comes to you. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. With my poetry, whatever the subject that I'm trying to represent is about determines the geographical background of that poem. For example, some of my poetry I've written is in the name of HIV. Some of the incidents that I represent, I was living in the city, so in turn they will have a city background. There are others which I've written since I've moved to the country, and in turn again, they'll have a country background. So I use both the city and the country in all my writing.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Peter. What about you, Cal? If I can turn to you now, when you and I chatted, I got the impression that you've lived in as many cities as you have in regional areas. So does this idea of any yearning for the city life ever creep into your work? And if so, why?
It's right, Michael. I have lived in a variety of places and my work does reflect that. So I've spent time in Dublin and Venice and Sydney, and very much enjoying living in country Cabango at present. I think place is important. I think it shapes who we are and certainly our experiences when we live there. And each place flavours, if you like, the way we are and the way we reflect that in our writing. For me, life's a bit of a journey, and my queer life has followed a somewhat slow and windy path. But certainly the places that I've lived help to colour that and help me to discover who I am. And I guess that's the core of my writing, encouraging each of us to truly be ourselves wherever we are.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful aim to have with any writing, I think. Now, our panelists have all agreed to read some of their work, but I've kept it hidden from them in what order we'll be doing that. So I'm going to drop you back in at Peter, and we're going to hear from
dear.
you reading today. While Peter's just preparing that, I just want to let you know that his 2 chapbooks of poetry are available from ginanderapress.com.au. That's spelt with a G, Ginandera Press, and its imprint, Picaro Press. The 2 chapbooks that Peter has written are called Conspiracy of Skin and The Scarlet Moment. So which of those are you reading from today, Peter?
I'm going to read from Conspiracy of Skin, and I'll just correct you a little bit. The only one of these available from Ginandera is Conspiracy of Skin. The Scarlet Moment was published by Picaro Press, which was a small poetry press based previously in Newcastle. It was bought out by Ginandera Press some years ago, and as far as I can tell, those books have disappeared from the publishing scene. I do have copies of The Scarlet Moment if anyone wants to buy it, but for now I'm reading from Conspiracy of Skin.
Thank you, Peter.
So,
take it away.
Okay. It's always hard to choose a poem or to know what to read. So I'm going to read a poem called The Odds. I drove around the house for 3 days. Should I stop fucking men? Should I find out about the virus? These questions will make and unmake my life. If I were you, I'd rather know, said my sister Kate. 26th of July, 1984. Taylor Square Private Clinic. Anxiety ripples the blue air waiting room. I stripped my future on the survey: drug use, diet, medical history, sexual practices. The consulting room door opens. My name ricochets around the dazed faces. The doctor scans the questions. Marijuana use? I frown. A blue-armed fist thumping my front door. All the information is confidential. He examines my body for symptoms, pressing lymph nodes, filling files with blood. That's a healthy color. The virus's trajectory is still uncertain. He advises more tests. For 3 weeks, I treat the house and streets like a moth among magpies. 17th of August, 1984. Another appointment, another survey. The doctor says your results from your last appointment are back. I lean forward. The technology for testing isn't developed yet. I swallow hard. Your results returned 2 positive and 1 negative. 2 to 1. Not bad odds. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, very much for that.
Can you see that?
Just hold it closer to your face, Peter, and we can have a look at the cover. Just hold it up and that's it. Hold it there. So people, please look out for Peter's chapbook, Conspiracy of Skin, available from ginanderapress.com.au. Remember, Ginandera is spelt with a G. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Now, our second theme for our session today is a word that gets thrown around quite a lot of people who live in the country. It's kind of related to the word tough. It's, of course, resilience. Like, why did you move out there? What is it out there that you enjoy and not enjoy? Resilience is a theme which runs through most of the writers' work today. But I'm going to throw to you first on this one, Josh, over in WA, because when I chatted with you and also had a look at the work that you've put together over the last little while, last 10, 15 years or so, I saw that you're writing a lot about self-acceptance, but also about rejection, which is a big part of the writer's life. So in what sense is resilience a theme in the work that you do, Josh?
Oh, look, Michael, it's it plays a lot in what I do, especially for the work that I do with kids, especially the kids' books that I write. Just getting the idea of what is resilience, what does resilience look like, and how kids and adults apply resilience. And I also wrote a book a couple of years ago called Find Your Creative Mojo, and that is about the artist or the writer or just the creative person getting that creative expression out, but also to sort of steel themselves against the reality that as a creative person, we are going to come up against rejection. We're going to come up against criticism. Not everyone's going to like our work. And so we need to sort of be able to put that into a little box and go, okay, well, that's just a fact of life. How can I still honor my creative self to still keep moving forward and not be crippled by criticism and rejection and things like that? Because I see so many people, so many writers with their manuscripts sitting in the third drawer down or in the hard drive of the computer, and they're too scared to share it with someone. They're too scared to send it to a publisher or to an agent. And I'm going, the world's a poorer place because you haven't shared it. And so it's like,
Yeah.
and tying it back into living in the country is what I do. I suppose there's something about living closer to the elements that it sort of allows you to sort of live a more real life, as opposed to sitting in an air-conditioned house in the middle of the suburbs or something. But living out here, you're sort of more subjected to the extremes of life, I guess, weather-wise, and that can be sort of translated into real life, into all the rejections and all that sort of stuff. I've made a tenuous link there, Michael, but I'm
Well,
sticking
no,
with it.
talking about the extremes of life are great fodder for writing inspiration, let's face it. I'm going to throw to you now for a bit, Shayne. So, Shayne, when you and I chatted on the phone, you were talking to me courageously about some of the mental health themes in your work, particularly your playwriting. Can you speak to that theme of resilience? Are you perhaps a more resilient person having come from the country, do you think?
Yeah, I suppose so. But also there's sort of like a distance between like my mental health and my hometown, because it's not sort of spoken of. And I don't know if that's just a small town rural thing, but up in Sydney it's kind of normal to not be normal. So there's like a resilience in even being in Sydney and having to like navigate that by myself and then take it back to my hometown, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It does. I think that everyone who's come and gone from the country to the city, because there's really no divide unless you live in the suburbs, which I have done, which is kind of sometimes like a hybrid of both. They all have challenges, let's face it. It's not just the country, which has kind of got that tag of, having to really dig deep in order to survive out here. We do have air conditioning in the country. we do have we do have running water. So it depends on where you are, of course. Now, our next reading, I'm going to drop you in it now, Josh. While you're getting ready to read from your book, let me tell our audience a bit about it. One of Josh's many books that has been very popular is one called Being You Is Enough. Hold that up for us, please, Josh. Now, Josh's work is published by Australian publisher bigskypublishing.com.au. You can buy books from the publisher. You can buy them from Josh's website, but you can also buy his titles from all major online booksellers. I want you to go to your indie bookshop, though, in the suburbs and find them, because they can order it in for you, any of the titles that you'll be talking about today, well, most of them anyway. So without further ado, let's please hear from Being You Is Enough by Josh Langley.
Thank you, Michael. Now, this will be most probably the shortest reading of our little session here today, but just a bit of background. Bit of background now. This book, I wrote this book for my 8-year-old self because I don't have kids. So this is my sort of love letter to my 8-year-old self. I had a bit of a difficult upbringing, but it's the last 3 pages. So the whole idea is what would I go back and tell myself about life now? And I came up with 11 and a half really important things that I'll go back and tell my 8-year-old self. And the second last one is, take my thing out, I'll hold it up here. I do the illustrations as well. So it's being you is enough. You are perfect just the way you are. And the last one, which all mothers cry when they read it with their kids, is and that you are loved. And that's the simple thing that we all need to hear. And that's my quick reading from Being You Is Enough. Now, I think, has Michael frozen?
Yes, he is frozen.
Okay.
Hello.
If Michael is frozen for a moment.
No, he don't
I'm
go
back.
now. He's back. He's back.
I'm back. What did you do while I was away?
Ooh.
Well, we told stories about
I'm
you.
not telling you.
Now, I did hear a very little bit of that reading. Thank you, Josh, but I know that our viewers will have heard it all. So thank you for that. But and I do apologise. It may well be the remote area resilience deities pushing back at me for saying that you don't need resilience to live out here. As far as IT is concerned, you most definitely do. Now, let's move on. So thank you very much for that, Josh. Just a reminder that bigskypublishing.com.au is where you can find all Josh Langley's titles for young people. I'm going to read that book anyway, Josh, even though I missed out on that reading, because I reckon that there's tips for a 51-year-old in that too. So I'm looking forward to that.
For everyone.
Thank you. The next theme we're going to talk about is one which I think is running through all of the EnQueer sessions. I would lay money on that, and it's about what we generally talk about as pathways to publishing. We were chatting about it a bit before this session started, and I'm going to throw to you on this, Peter, because you are by far, I think, the writer amongst us who has the longest writing career. Been for you in terms of being an LGBTQIA plus author who has also lived in the regions of New South Wales in terms of getting your work published and in front of readers? That one's for you, Peter.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear all of it.
Oh, let me say it again. So, Peter, you are by far and away the longest writing career of all of the writers in our panel today. So I want to throw to you on this question of pathways to publication first. How has it been for you in terms of getting your work in front of readers in the publishing industry?
Ooh, gosh. This is a long and complicated knot of stories and experiences over many years.
I bet.
So I'll only talk about a few threads. Gosh, well, I'm not sure where to start. But I'll start talking about rejection. Or I could talk about my epic story, Survival Life with a Shadow. Perhaps I'll go with the latter.
Right.
Life with a Shadow is a memorial with a memoir with a 10-year journey. I've now been working on it for 10 years. It's gone from a collection of short stories through to a mosaic of experimental writing, through to filling out journal entries to become long-form narrative. Then it had an edited assessment, and the editor suggested filling out more of the family and relationship issues, not so much the actual journey with HIV, which I did. And in turn, I finished it some years ago and have sent it to I think I've sent it to 10 publishers. And the last publisher I had was with University of Queensland Press through a competition run by the Queensland Writers Centre called The First 20 Pages. Madonna Duffy, who, if I'm correct, is the head editorial staff in UQP. She read the first 20 pages. She liked it. We had a telephone conversation. And I sent her the rest of the manuscript, which she responded to with positive and critical comments. I took the critical comments on board. So for the perhaps 8th time, I rewrote the whole thing, and I rewrote 81,000 words in just over 4 months.
Oh,
I
fantastic.
didn't
Well
simply
done.
cut and paste. I actually printed out pages and typed into a new manuscript from those pages. So in turn, I changed many parts of it and reduced the number of words. I made a title, which is always a good thing. At the moment, I'm editing that particular version, and I'm about halfway through. So I'm hoping to have that finished in 2 weeks. And
Oh gosh,
then I'm hoping
that
that
sounds like
UQP will read it again. And so the story continues.
it certainly does. So I think a lot of people get a bit confused about the work that it takes to write. We're generally sitting at our computers or sitting at a notebook, and we are just doing something that seems to be fairly cool, but it's all going inside. I think you'd agree. Fantastic journey with that particular bit, Peter. Throw to you now, Cal. You, out of all of us, came, I think, to writing the latest in 2018. So how have you gone in terms of getting your work to readers?
Well, Michael, I've self-published my book. Oh, hold it there. Risking Wonderful, The Art of Living Inside Out. There we go. And it's a bit of a memoir
Wonderful. Thank you,
for
Cal.
me. Yeah, I worked in collaboration with some a wonderful illustrator in Melbourne, and the graphic design people were there. So that was challenging. We had the Black Summer fires, of course, in Cobargo, and COVID. But I managed to self-publish it, and I've been pleased that it did actually win international awards, Silver Nautilus Book Award, and in the International Book Awards, it was a finalist for the LGBTI non-fiction and also for the best interior. So credit to my, I don't know if you can see, designers and
Yes, yes.
illustrators, but it's quite a colourful work, and there's definitely a rainbow in there, and it's the story of my life, basically, a memoir. But in terms of
Wonderful.
publishing in COVID, very difficult, and I'm sure it's been challenging for everyone. Yeah.
And you also mentioned the summer bushfires, and we know, of course, that Cobargo certainly made the news for not very pleasant reasons during that particular incident. But yes, major incidents can have a huge impact on your flow as a writer and your confidence levels going in. But Cal, you're up now for a reading now that you've got that book out. So while you find your extract, just let me remind readers that Cal's book is called Risking Wonderful, The Art of Living Inside Out. It's got memoir themes to it, and it's available to buy from globalcontact.com.au. Now, this is a South Coast bookstore in the region where Cal is from, but they also sell books online. So that's globalcontact.com.au, and you're looking for Cal Móre, Risking Wonderful, The Art of Living Inside Out. So please take it away, Cal.
You are unique, a once-in-a-lifetime earthling, embodiment of spirit and stardust, billions of years in the making. You carried the genes of your ancestors as a silent witness to your long lineage, all who have led the way before you. You are one in body and breath with all that was, is, and will be, part of a living community, connected, one in one, home. And no one else can be you. And no matter how hard you try, you will never be anyone else. You are a gift of and to the universe in this time and space. And your fellow earth creatures simply ask you to be you, the most authentic you can possibly be. For your true colours are needed to paint our world beautiful.
Oh, how wonderful. I don't know about anyone else, but I feel like I'm breathing more deeply and feeling a lot more centered than I was when I was lost in the ether a few minutes ago. Thank you so much, Cal. That was beautifully read too. I'm going to backtrack on themes a little bit because as we're approaching Shayne giving us a reading of their work, we need to acknowledge that we have in our midst somebody in Shayne, who is actually studying creative writing. Now, I'll be honest, that is something I would have loved to have done. It wasn't the pathway that life laid out for me. So I want to ask you, what's it like to study creative writing?
It's like not studying at all. It's really amazing. It's like especially now that it's online as well, I don't even have to leave my house and I just get to have my laptop, have my tea and just write and then get feedback every second day on how I can write more. Like it's really amazing. I really, really love studying it.
And what is your sort of classic, I don't know what the word to use in, not class, but tutorial session? What are you sort of introduced or exposed to on a weekly basis when it comes to learning to write creatively?
So much stuff. Like one of my units that I'm doing at the moment is writing for performance, and it's the shape of the course is not like write a play. It's how can you perform language in general, and how does the body perform, and how does the voice perform, and then sort of how can you translate all of that into words. So stuff like that, really like outside of the box, not like high school English type of writing where you're given like a cue to write. It's sort of you can make what you want of it. It's lovely and it's really collaborative and it's just nice. I love it.
Wonderful. Now, Cal, sorry, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
You most certainly are. Do you have a question for Shayne?
I do. Do you get criticism from other students or only staff?
No, we get from the class that we're in, we'll have specific lessons where like 3 of us will share work and then get feedback from the rest of the class. Yeah.
Okay. Because while I was listening to you, I was thinking back to when some of our creative writing classes at the University of Technology back in the 80s, where we had a class of perhaps a dozen people, where each person could criticise your and complimented your work. So I was wondering what the structure of those classes was like now, in the days of COVID-19, Zoom, and many other things.
Yeah, it's still super interactive. We upload it and then a week later, everybody has to sort of give feedback because we're assessed on it. But it's also just like conversational and lovely. And I think people want to give feedback. I do at least anyway.
Shayne, since we're talking about a broader theme of pathways to education or perhaps not public, but forms in a theatre writing context, how your course tutors or teachers preparing you and your fellows that once you complete your that one was for you, Shayne.
I lost the last half of that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me repeat it. So, considering that you're studying creative writing, I'm wondering how much your course teachers, tutors, professors are preparing you and your students for path publication or performance once you complete your study.
I mean, we are offered contacts, I guess, and like anything that's happening, like this festival, for instance, that's sort of passed around through everyone. In terms of like publication and stuff, I'm still learning about all of that and who I can reach for and like to assist in that sort of stuff. But I think what I'm getting a lot out of studying creative writing is just like a confidence in my own work and how I can make my voice heard and like I can choose where it goes in a way. And yeah, just that it's important that everybody's work is out there regardless of how you get it there, I suppose.
Yeah, good point. Well, it's your turn now, Shayne, to read. And I believe you're going to be reading something from your play. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. My play, it's
while
called Brother.
while Shayne prepares that, yes, thank you. It's called Brother. Now, this is a play that's in development. Development is a very big, broad term in performing arts circles. But Shayne tells me that the concept's in place, it's semi-written, and there's plenty more work to do. And Shayne has been reaching out to theatre makers across Sydney. But this one, let us say, this is a very brave, very courageous pitching session of Shayne's concept. So I want to alert any theatre makers out there who are watching this to pay attention. Go ahead, Shayne.
Okay, great. I'll just give it's a scene because there's a monologue within it, but it's a quick scene. And I'll just give content warning that the scene does reference mental ill health and indirectly talks about self-harm. So yeah. I'll just also give a quick little bio of the characters. So Brother is approaching 40 fucking fast. The type that will have steak with tomato sauce and call it steak and veggies. Silently, mentally unstable. He's an alcoholic and lonely. Sister is in the middle of her 20s. Vegetarian just to piss brother off. Loudly, mentally unstable. Obsessive compulsive disorder sufferer. Also lonely. Almost committed myself. A facility, not a mental hospital. 'Cause you're mental. 'Cause I'm mental. I didn't know that. Rang up and everything, gave my name. Why'd you ring? Well, I asked Mum to. I was like, Mum, I'm like covered in chemical burns and I can't eat food that I actually have to touch, which is like all food. So she asked me to Google the places I could go, like it's a spicy little weekend getaway. Super expeno though. I sent her a few links to the free ones and she said, yeah, don't you have to be properly committed to get into those ones? Like someone calls the police on you because you're a danger to yourself type of thing. And then she sort of asked, do you want me to call the police on you? And I said, yes, please. And then we kind of never spoke about it again.
Thank you, Shayne. You can really hear the play there. I mean, plays are dialogue. Generally, plays are dialogue, and it sounds like you've got a very good ear for it, but also getting that message across. So thank you very much. So that was an extract from a play called Brother. It's Shayne de Groot, and it's in development. So anyone who wants to get in touch with Shayne can do so via the EnQueer team. Now we're going to start talking about, we're backtracking a little bit into one of our themes of resilience, but we're going to put it in the context of the H word. Now this word is something that gets bandied around in country areas a bit because people generally feel or assume that people in the country are more prone to homophobia. That's the H word. You would have seen it in the session notes for Out Bush, this session. So what I want to do, I'm going to throw to you first on this, Josh. Homophobia. What would you say about that in a country context? Are we more prone to it or less? is it something that you deal with in your writing?
It's not something I deal with in my writing, but I would say that yes, we in the regional areas it is more prone to homophobia, and I suppose the more remote you are, the more far or the smaller the country town, that's more prevalent. Yes, inner city, big cities, very accepting. I suppose one of the strange thing is where I actually live is just a small community, and everyone loves us. I mean, it's just like this. Everyone's just so fantastic. You wouldn't even know that, my husband and I are a gay couple because it's just like everyone's just so accepting. Except the major town that we come close to, which is Bunbury, that tends to every now and then, like on a Saturday night, if you go out drinking, it's like not the safest place to go. And even those, like about 8 years ago, we went to one of the nightclubs after a work function, and my husband actually got punched out just for dancing on the dance floor. We were dancing together, and so it is still prevalent, and it still happens. And back 8 years ago, when you were in a situation where you just don't talk about it, you don't press charges because that deep shame is still there. And so you don't want to bring that out. You don't want to make a fuss. You don't want to do anything. And then people still, they get away with it. So I don't think that would happen in the city as much as it would in regional areas, to answer your question.
Thank you, Josh. I'm very sorry to hear that you both went through that kind of incident. It's there are incidents like that taking place, I think, across all regions of Australia. So it's disappointing to hear that. Let me go to you now, Al. H word. Has that ever had Ria? Something that you that well? Can you hear me?
I can, Michael. I caught the end of it. My experience has been that there's good and in both city and country, and certainly I worked in spiritual care in aged care. When I moved to the country, my appointment was actually vetoed by a local church on the basis of me being in a same-sex partnership with Deb, my partner. So I understand that's pretty traumatic when that happens. On the same account, I think it's a matter of finding your own people, and certainly I resolved to make a negative a positive, and I actually took time off then to write the book to tell a different side of the story. We moved to Cobargo, which you may have seen on the news at the time of the postal vote. The posties had up a rainbow flag, which someone had complained in the local community, and they had to pull it down. But then all the shopkeepers in the main street decided they'd fly
quite a notorious case.
Yes, so the bookshops had rainbow books, the clothes shops had rainbow clothes across. So I guess my encouragement is try to find your own people, find a safe space. And in that regard, there's opportunities in both the city and the country, I think.
Oh, yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, it was a fantastic example of a great response to homophobia, that the case that you're talking about made news everywhere. What about you up in the Northern Rivers, Peter? How do you confront homophobia in your writing? How do you feel that it's something that you have to confront living in the Northern Rivers?
No, I don't write about homophobia in my writing. In terms of my day-to-day life, in the 25 years I've been here, I've hardly encountered it at all. Of course, it does happen here in Bundjalung country, in the Northern Rivers. At the same time, I suspect that the Northern Rivers is an exception or one of the exceptions in terms of regional areas, because the area has had a decades-long strong queer communities for quite a few decades, which does make a big difference with the local communities. And of course, it does happen. In terms of my own, of course, my view of homophobia is limited by my own personal life and what I'm involved with. I did play football, as in soccer, with a local football club for many years. In that club, I experienced homophobia. It's probably the only part of my life where I encountered ongoing homophobia, mainly from the younger male members. Within that cohort, there were individual young men who were fine with me, and at the same time, again, there were many older people who were perfectly accepting. So, all in all, that particular set of experiences was a very mixed one. I dare say there is homophobia at places of employment around the region. I occasionally hear of cases through friends of mine. So, all in all, I don't encounter it very much at all.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm pleased to hear that, Peter. What about you, Shayne? Growing up down in the Narooma region, did you encounter much prejudice of this type?
No, I personally didn't. But I think that's more like I sort of came into my own and found my identity through coming up to the city where it's and living in Newtown. It's very much like you be you and you be loud about it. And I think if I went back to Narooma, to visit friends and family and stuff, I don't imagine that there would be a lot of homophobia. Um, I would hope that there isn't because they're lovely people. But I feel like there would be a sort of almost like a reintroduction that I would have to go through of like, which is like in a way a form of homophobia where you have to sort of announce what you are for people because it's hard to comprehend for some reason sometimes. So I feel like maybe that would happen. I would have to explain that this is my partner, it is a girl. But other than that, I haven't really experienced homophobia. I'm really grateful for that.
Is it something that you tackle in your writing?
It is, yeah. I not so much homophobia, but more so the lack of representation of queer women, in particular in Sydney, on stages, even on screen. I don't see a lot of queer women or stories that represent that. So I'm in my work, I'm sort of working towards adding to that platform that I can see people sort of putting stuff onto. Then I'm like, yeah, cool, I want to do that too. And hopefully all together we make ourselves seen and heard.
Disability is a very big issue when it comes to the performing arts in all its form, movies through to plays, musicals, etc. In what do you think that's going to be a long-term mission of yours to get that visibility for queer women into the kind of stuff that you write? Do you think it will be a challenge?
No, I don't, because I think it is the people you surround yourself with, and the arts community are just lovely people in general and willing to push boundaries and stuff and break rules that have been put before us. So surrounding myself with like other queer creatives, and we all just sort of have one unified voice full of all the stories and And there is like sort of a an uprising of younger voices and queer voices that I can see happening, and I'm just like stoked to be at my age and be able to be a part of it.
Well, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful, Shayne. Now, I mentioned the term safe space, which means different things to different people and different regions. But as we come towards the end of our session, it was actually you, Cal, who put this seed in my head about one aspect of what we can achieve in the session today out bush. And that's all about these safe spaces. Because I have noticed, having come from the New England region of New South Wales, I have noticed in the last years a smattering of rainbow and queer events happening, not just of New South Wales, Australia. Cal, you should to me this down in Bega a bit out.
That's right. A call out to ACON and their outreach programs, because they're providing support where perhaps there hasn't been any or very much at all. And for example, at Headspace Speaker, they're helping support the LGBTQIA youth group, who in 2019 organised the first Pride celebration for the far south coast themselves, the Rainbow Wave Festival, which was held in Pambler in 2019 and online this year. And it was great the way the community got involved. They asked a function centre at Pambler if they might consider hosting at Oaklands, and they actually gave them the venue for free. The group that organised it got the Rainbow Inclusion Award, Mental Health Matters, sponsored by ACON in 2019. It's exciting that from the grassroots, younger people are empowering themselves and the community and contributing to awareness by, things like the Rainbow Wave Festival. I think there's a lot of hope within those.
There sure is. What was the name of the event again, please, Cal?
It's the
Rainbow Wave.
Rainbow Wave Festival.
Well, I'm assuming people will be able to find that via ACON, but they perhaps might have a website or some social media for people to look them up.
They do have their own website, yeah.
And what's the travel time between Sydney and Bega, or that region where it takes place?
That's a good question. It's about 4 hours from now, so maybe 5.5, 6 hours, depending on where you are.
About 6 hours to get down. Now, this is not a travel season to add, but we're all reopening now, which is fantastic.
You can fly to Maringula. So,
oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
well, there we go. You can go first class or hit the road and head down for Rainbow Wave down in the Bega region. Now, Josh, over in your part of West Australia, what's happening there in terms of rain events in the bush?
Well, yes, I'm glad you asked. Out Southwest, which is an organisation based in Bunbury, they've got Bunbury Pride Fest coming up, and that's on Saturday, November 20. Now, that's a fairly big event, so a lot of people come down for that. It's got fairs, stalls, all that sort of stuff. So that's one of the really big, great events that sort of, it's good to showcase that, you know, there are queer people living down here and they can all get together, and it's great. So that's Bunbury Pride Fest, Saturday, November 20.
Wonderful, wonderful. Bunbury Pride, great. And now, Peter, you've been involved with the Tropical Fruits event in Lismore for a very long time, I believe. So is it going strong? Is it going to be happening, do we think, this year? Or
it is still going strong. At the same time, Tropical Fruits events have been affected by the COVID-19 virus. However, Tropical Fruits Fair Day, or Fruitopia, is being held on the 5th of December at Lismore Showground. Also, we're also had a series of events called Queer Stories, organised by another organisation called Queer Feminismo. What else? And there's also Queer Visa once a month at different pubs around the region, among other activities.
Well, that's
as well as
fantastic, Peter. I think
get-togethers at people's farms and houses.
wonderful. I think the Northern Rivers really has plenty of scores on the board in terms of visibility for LGBTQIA plus people.
Yeah.
The only event I could contribute to this particular discussion is that for the very first time, I believe, in 2021, there was a small celebration for concurrent with the Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras at Armidale, which was facilitated by the University of New England. Now, I found out about it as it was happening, and it's a bit too far for me to have got there for this year. But I really commend them for doing that, because it's certainly got a lot of uptake on social media and the local media. No doubt it ruffled a few feathers, but it looked extremely well done, a huge amount of fun, and I really commend the people who were behind it in doing it. So perhaps they'll go ahead again next year, and a few more of us will be able to come out of the woodwork and go along and support them. Now, Shayne, even though you don't live back down in the Narooma region, there doesn't sound like there's anything happening down in that region, but let's forget about the country for a moment. Whereabouts do you find visibility and safe spaces, perhaps at university or in the city where you are, in order to foster this desire, this plan to get more visibility for queer women in the performing arts?
Newtown is just like pops off. Newtown's a great suburb. Everybody's very much on the same level, very free, hang out in the park, everybody's best friends. Yeah, I think the suburbs in Sydney, depending where you are and which suburb, is like where you can find your vibe. So I just hang out in Newtown. It's lovely.
Well, that's wonderful. I'll be going to Newtown myself very soon, because I haven't been there for far too long, and I'm looking forward to it. Well, we're just about up to our time limit for today's session, Out Bush. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Please wave when I say your name again. We've got Peter Mitchell from the Northern Rivers up in Bundjalung country. We have been joined by Cal Móre down in Unit country, down Cobargo way in the Bega Valley. We've been joined by Shayne de Groot, who's actually in the outer suburbs of northwestern Sydney at the moment, lives in the city, but comes from Yuin country also, down at the Narooma region. And last but not least, Josh Langley, over in southwest Western Australia, down near Bunbury, joining us from Wadandi country. I have been so pleased and thrilled by the ability to even gather this group of people together. Long may it rain. I hope EnQueer is going to do this kind of thing in the future. Please get behind EnQueer. It's unique in terms of what it does. We do have some tradition of gathering together LGBTQIA plus people in literary circles in the past. A wonderful present to find like this available. I've joined you today from the country, which is in the New England region of New South Wales, up in the north of the state. And thank you very much to EnQueer, and thank you very much to all of you for joining us today. Enjoy the whole festival.
Thank you, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.